Picture this. You are standing in the aisle of, your favorite boutique wellness store.
Right.
Or maybe you're just scrolling online late at night. And you pick up this beautifully designed frosted glass bottle of skincare serum.
Oh, yeah, the classic minimalist aesthetic.
Exactly. It has this super chic label. It promises pure, unadulterated, clean beauty. And as you're holding it, you might actually catch yourself wondering who actually makes this.
Right, because you just naturally assume it's the brand, right? The name stamped in that elegant font right on the front.
Yeah, exactly. But, well, spoiler alert, it is rarely the brand itself. Usually that perfectly crafted serum comes from a contract manufacturer or a CM.
It's genuinely one of the most fascinating open secrets of the entire consumer goods industry. I mean, truly. The brand you follow on social media is essentially the architect.
Like they draw up the vision.
Right. But the contract manufacturer, they're the construction crew pouring the concrete, the structural engineer making sure the building doesn't collapse, and the legal compliance officer all rolled into one massive operation.
Which is wild when you think about it. And that is exactly our mission for today's deep dive. We are going to equip you with the ultimate blueprint for navigating this high-stakes partnership between brands and manufacturers.
It really is high stakes.
It is. And we're pulling all of our insights today from a really comprehensive, detailed article published on March 16th, 2026. It's by Laurent Fabian over at Ingredientsage, and it's titled Clean Beauty Contract Manufacturing: The Ultimate Buyer's Guide to Selecting a Partner.
It's a fantastic guide.
It really is. We're going to uncover exactly how brands ensure that a clean promise actually survives the incredibly complex journey from, a raw concept in a founder's head to that physical frosted glass product on the shelf.
Yeah, it's a long journey.
I genuinely love peeking behind the curtain of the things we buy every day, so let's just get right into it.
Let's do it.
So before a product can be manufactured at scale, it obviously has to be invented. But according to the guide, this invention phase isn't just someone, throwing organic lavender and coconut oil into a mixing bowl.
No, not at all.
They describe this really rigorous stage gate approach. So how do we actually get from an idea to a real formula?
So the stage gate process is critical because it introduces a highly structured sequential methodology to what is otherwise a very messy creative process.
Right.
You don't just jump from an idea to a factory. You start with discovery and a brief. Then you move into concept design, which requires a completely transparent bill of materials.
Meaning every single component is listed out.
Exactly, every single one. From there, you go to bench testing. And bench testing is essentially making the product in tiny beaker-sized batches in a laboratory setting.
Right, just to see if the chemistry actually works on a fundamental level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do these things mix?
Exactly. But a formula that works perfectly in a 50-milliliter beaker might behave completely differently when you try to make it in a 5,000-liter industrial vat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I guess the scale changes the physics of it.
Completely.
Yeah.
The sheer forces of giant mixing blades, the heat generated by industrial pumps, all of that can just destroy a delicate formula.
So that's why they do it in stages.
Right. That's why the next gate is pilot production, where you test it on smaller factory machines before finally arriving at scale-up readiness.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Because baked into all of those stages is something called stability testing. And when you think about it, that makes total sense.
It's essential.
Right. Because you might have a clean beauty emulsion, which is basically just oil and water forced to play nicely together, or a highly active skincare ingredient, or a dietary supplement powder.
Yeah.
You need to know that it won't just separate into a gross, clumpy mess after sitting in a hot warehouse for 2 weeks.
Yes, and to ensure that doesn't happen, a rigorous CM runs both accelerated and real-time stability tests.
What does accelerated mean in this context?
They will literally bake the product in industrial ovens, freeze it, and expose it to intense UV light.
Wow.
Yeah, it simulates a year's worth of shelf life in a matter of weeks.
That is intense.
It is. But in the clean beauty space, the scrutiny doesn't just stop at the finished formula. The raw ingredients themselves are heavily interrogated.
Right, the source material.
Exactly. A capable contract manufacturer has to demonstrate an incredibly strict supplier vetting process. For example, they have to verify REACH compliance.
Okay, for those who might not know, what exactly is REACH compliance and why is it such a massive hurdle?
So REACH is a major European regulation for chemical safety. It stands for Registration, Evaluation, Authorization, and Restriction of Chemicals.
That is a mouthful.
It really is. But it essentially mandates that any chemical substance used in a product has a documented safety profile. You can't just use a new botanical extract because it sounds nice on a label.
Right, you have to prove it's safe.
Exactly. You have to prove to European regulators that it doesn't accumulate in the environment or cause long-term health issues.
So how do manufacturers actually keep track of all that?
They use strict supplier scorecards. They place suppliers into specific risk tiers. And most importantly, they demand certificates of analysis, or COAs, for every critical material.
I really want to highlight that because a COA isn't just a basic receipt that says, yes, we delivered 100 pounds of lavender.
No, not at all.
It's more like a molecular fingerprint.
Right.
It proves that the specific batch of lavender oil you bought doesn't contain hidden heavy metals from the soil or residual pesticides.
That is precisely what it is. It's the scientific proof of origin and purity. And there's a great point made in the guide by Dr. Maya Kapoor. She's a senior formulation scientist.
Oh, yeah, I remember her quote.
She says that clean label development thrives when you pair green chemistry principles with robust, data-driven experiments.
I love that quote. When I read about this level of transparency, the bill of materials, the COAs, the molecular fingerprints, it makes me think of a clean label CM as an open kitchen restaurant.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
You know the kind I mean. You're sitting at your table, but there are no walls. You can see exactly what the chefs are doing. You can see every raw ingredient sitting on the stainless steel counter.
Right.
And you know exactly how it's being handled before it ever gets plated and brought out to you.
And in this scenario, the regulators and the conscious consumers are the ones sitting at that table, basically demanding full visibility into the kitchen.
Yes, exactly. But here's where I really want to push back on something the article brought up because it feels a bit contradictory to me.
Okay, what's that?
The source talks a lot about the strategy of nearshoring, which means sourcing materials geographically closer to the target markets to, shorten development cycles and reduce supply chain risk.
Yes, nearshoring is huge right now.
But if I am a brand founder and I want a rare exotic botanical from a remote mountain range on the other side of the planet, but my CM is constantly pushing me to nearshore everything.
Right.
Aren't we just killing the brand's unique selling point for the sake of supply chain convenience? Like, won't consumers feel cheated if they're paying premium prices for locally sourced ingredients rather than the rare botanicals they're used to seeing on the label?
What's fascinating here is that we really have to redefine what true clean beauty actually means in today's market.
Okay, how so?
Well, it's not fundamentally about the marketing fluff of an exotic backstory anymore. It's about verifiable origin data. Nearshoring isn't just a geographic limitation, it is a deliberate strategy for transparency and control.
Ah, I see.
Yeah, Dr. Lina Romero, the sustainability director quoted in the article, points out that transparent sourcing and nearshoring dramatically shorten development cycles while improving supply chain resilience in volatile markets.
So it's mostly about risk mitigation.
Exactly. If that rare Himalayan botanical has a completely murky supply chain, lacks a clear certificate of analysis, or poses a high risk of cross-contamination during a massive global transit route.
Then you can't really call it clean.
Exactly. A responsible CM will argue that it does not belong in a clean label product. You simply cannot guarantee its clean status. So yes, it might mean sacrificing a fun marketing story, but it ensures verifiable safety and a product that can actually be reliably manufactured year-round.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So we have our transparent, stable, perfectly sourced, and verifiable recipe.
Yes.
But having a perfect formula sitting in a lab doesn't mean anything if you can't get it to the masses. Moving from the lab to the factory floor brings us to the next massive hurdle.
The regulatory gauntlet.
Right. How do you ensure this recipe is perfectly replicated 10,000 times, and how do you make sure it is legally compliant to sell across international borders?
You really do have to enter the regulatory gauntlet. And it is quite a challenge, particularly when you look at the deep divide between the European Union and the United States markets.
Yeah, the article mentions just how completely different these two markets are. How much harder does that actually make this process for a manufacturer?
It effectively means running two parallel compliance operations. For the EU market, your CM partner has to manage complex safety dossiers and CPNP registrations.
Wait, CPNP?
Yeah, it stands for the Cosmetic Products Notification Portal.
And what does that portal actually do? Is it just a bureaucratic checkbox or?
Far from it. The CPNP is a centralized, highly detailed database. Every single chemical component of a cosmetic product must be registered there before it can be sold in Europe.
Wow, every single one.
Every single one. The primary reason is so that poison control centers across the entire EU know exactly what is in a product if, for example, a toddler accidentally swallows a bottle of serum.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, it's about immediate, transparent public safety.
Okay. And what about the U.S. side?
The U.S. approach, which is governed by FDA guidelines, historically places a massive emphasis on labeling checks and the substantiation of claims.
Meaning the marketing on the box.
Right. If you are going to print reduces fine lines by 20% on the packaging, the manufacturer needs to ensure there is hard clinical evidence backing up that specific claim.
Otherwise, the brand is exposed to massive legal liability.
Exactly.
To manage this dual reality, the source mentions that world-class CMs align with something called ISO 22716.
Yes. ISO 22716 is the international standard providing good manufacturing practices, or GMP, specifically tailored for the cosmetics industry.
Right.
And the absolute spine of that quality system, the thing that keeps the whole operation standing, is a KP program. That stands for Corrective and Preventative Action.
It is fascinating to me that something as dry as a KP protocol is actually the main thing stopping $1 million product recall.
It really is.
When I read the description of how it works, it immediately made me think of an immune system for a factory.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, think about it. A human immune system identifies a threat, it neutralizes it, and then it creates antibodies so that exact same virus can never infect you again.
Right.
That is exactly what a KP program does for manufacturing. If a batch of lotion comes off the line with the wrong viscosity, meaning it's suddenly too watery to pump out of the bottle, the KP loop investigates that deviation.
It finds the root cause.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It fixes the immediate problem, and then it structurally changes the documented manufacturing process so that specific error physically cannot happen again.
Yes, and to take that analogy a step further, a strong KPA program doesn't just wait for the factory to get sick. It actively looks for potential vulnerabilities before a bad batch is ever mixed.
Proactive immunity.
Exactly. Dr. Samuel Chen, a quality assurance lead, quoted in the guide, reinforces this mindset. He states, in clean label manufacturing, you can't rely on suspicion, you need data.
So true.
End-to-end KP loops are completely non-negotiable if you want to sustain consumer trust.
The article actually provides a very practical 4-pillar assessment for evaluating if a CM's quality system is up to par.
Yeah, it's a great checklist.
You look at their KPA effectiveness history, obviously. You look at their data integrity and how they control electronic records so nobody can just, overwrite a failed test result.
Which happens, unfortunately.
Right. You look at their audit readiness, and you look at their continuous improvement culture, which you usually see in how they force their raw material suppliers to upgrade their own standards.
And this brings us to an absolutely crucial point about why this matters to the brand founder. Strict regulatory compliance and rigid quality systems are very often viewed by creative founders as red tape.
Oh, for sure. They just want to launch.
Exactly. They see it as a roadblock that slows their launch down. But the reality is the exact opposite.
Wait, how does a mountain of international red tape actually speed things up?
Because a strong contract manufacturer maintains a regulatory playbook filled with documented standard operating procedures, or SOPs.
Okay.
There's a great quote from Dr. Alina Rossi, a regulatory affairs director. She says, regulatory readiness isn't a checkpoint, it's a continuous capability.
Right.
Think about what happens if you suddenly need to substitute an ingredient because of a global supply shortage.
Which happens all the time now.
All the time. If you don't have SOPs, you are gambling in the dark. But if you have a documented procedure, the SOP dictates exactly how to test the new ingredient, how to document the substitution, and how to legally register that change with the CPNP and the FDA.
Oh, wow. So it takes all the guesswork out.
Exactly. It accelerates your timeline and makes scaling internationally highly predictable.
Okay, so the formula is perfect. It is legally compliant in multiple countries, and the factory's immune system guarantees it is perfectly reproducible every single time.
Yep.
But having a pristine formula sitting in a 5,000-liter stainless steel vat doesn't mean anything if it degrades the second it touches the consumer's bottle. It needs to go into a container.
Right.
And that container holds the brand's absolute most valuable secret.
You were talking about the wrapper in the vault? Packaging and intellectual property protection.
Exactly.
They seem like entirely unrelated concepts, but they require the exact same level of meticulous foresight from a contract manufacturer.
Let's start with the wrapper. the physical packaging. The guide emphasizes that sustainable packaging isn't just a nice-to-have bonus anymore.
No, it's a requirement.
It's a mandatory core requirement for clean beauty brands. We are looking at recyclable materials and PCR, which stands for post-consumer recycled content.
Right, meaning using plastic that has already been used and recycled by a consumer rather than creating virgin plastic.
Exactly.
Manufacturers are also conducting life cycle assessments, or LCAs, to deeply understand the environmental impact of a package, from its initial creation all the way to the consumer's recycling bin.
That's amazing.
They are even looking at near-field and on-demand packaging solutions to help brands push toward a truly circular economy.
But the most critical technical aspect of packaging mentioned in the source, and here is where it gets really interesting, because I had never considered this before, is packaging compatibility testing.
Oh, this is huge.
I immediately thought of this like a bad roommate situation.
A bad roommate situation.
Yeah, you have these incredibly potent, clean skincare active ingredients. They're effective precisely because they are highly active.
Yeah.
But if you don't test those actives against the specific post-consumer recycled plastic bottle you want to use, you might find out that your amazing formula is literally dissolving the packaging it lives in.
Yep.
The roommates are destroying each other.
Exactly. Or, conversely, the packaging material is slowly leaching microplastics or chemical plasticizers back into the product.
Which is just as bad.
It instantly invalidates your clean label claims, ruins the efficacy of the formula, and destroys the shelf life. It is a disastrous brand-ending scenario that can be entirely avoided, but only if the CM integrates compatibility testing data extremely early in the development workflow.
So that protects the physical product.
Yes.
But as we transition to the conceptual vault intellectual property, the risks become even more profound.
They do.
When you hire a CM, you are essentially handing them the keys to your entire business.
You are, which is why IP data security is paramount. The guide stresses the absolute necessity of robust non-disclosure agreements, obviously, but also secure digital data rooms with heavy encryption and role-based access.
Meaning only certain people can even see the files.
Exactly. Only the specific chemists working on your formula should be able to see it. But the biggest IP trap is failing to explicitly define who owns derivative formulations.
What does that mean in practice? Derivative formulations.
Let's say you bring a formula to a CM, but it keeps separating in their giant vats. The CM's internal chemists figure out that by adding a specific naturally derived stabilizer, the formula works perfectly.
Right.
Who owns that new, improved formula? You, because it is your brand, or the CM, because their scientists solved the problem.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you don't define that in the initial contract, the CM might claim they own 50% of your flagship product's IP.
That is terrifying for a startup.
It is. Dr. Amina Basu, an intellectual property counsel, offers a stark warning in the text. She says, IP clarity at the contract stage prevents disputes at scale.
That makes total sense.
Because if your brand explodes in popularity and you eventually outgrow this manufacturer and need to move to a massive global facility, you need to know exactly what you are legally allowed to take with you.
Which is why the article heavily highlights post-termination data handling.
Right.
If a brand leaves a CM, you have to ensure the manufacturer doesn't retain residual access to your confidential formulas, your supplier lists, or your proprietary packaging designs.
Right.
You cannot leave your competitive edge sitting on a server somewhere just because the contract ended.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, both packaging compatibility testing and IP security are fundamentally about preventing long-term degradation. One prevents the physical degradation of the serum in the bottle, and the other prevents the legal degradation of the brand's financial value.
So we have designed it, we have tested it, we have securely packaged it, and we have legally protected the rest.
The fun part is over.
Right. Now we hit the harsh business reality. How does a brand actually afford to scale this massive operation? And what happens when the physical product finally ends up in the hands of the consumer?
This is exactly where the lofty idealism of clean beauty crashes into the rigorous demands of commercial viability.
It all comes down to money.
Protecting profit margins and actually delivering on a growth plan requires an airtight, highly specific contract regarding costs and lead times.
The source gets very granular here. It tells buyers to deeply discuss pricing models and minimum order quantities, or MOQs.
MOQs are crucial. A factory isn't going to turn on a massive assembly line to make 100 bottles of serum.
Right.
They might require a minimum order of 10,000 units just to make turning the machines on financially viable.
And the brand has to pay for all of that up front. The article also tells brands to demand a detailed bill of materials, a BOM, that breaks down material costs down to the cent, including the cost of potential substitute ingredients.
Transparency is key.
But the thing that stood out the most to me in this section was the intense emphasis on change controls.
Change controls are how you survive the manufacturing process. Mr. Daniel Kim, a commercial director quoted in the guide, says that clarity in change management is the secret to preventing budget creep during scale-up.
Budget creep.
Budget creep is a silent killer for wellness startups.
How does it happen?
Imagine a raw material cost suddenly fluctuates due to a bad harvest, or a minor regulatory update in Europe forces a slight reformulation of your preservative system.
Okay.
If you do not have a rigidly defined change control process in your contract, the manufacturer can unexpectedly inflate your costs and pass those overruns entirely onto you.
Ouch.
Yeah, a strong contract dictates exactly how scope changes are captured financially. The guide even recommends setting up staged payment schedules that are strictly tied to successfully completing development milestones.
And to make sure you are actually getting the quality you are paying for, there is the audit side of the business reality.
Is verifying everything.
The guide says your CM must demonstrate readiness for both on-site physical audits and remote digital audits. They need to be able to produce material safety data sheets, full traceability records, and granular batch records for every single production run on demand.
That's a lot of paperwork.
It is. Prianair, a supply chain director, is quoted saying, "The best CMs treat supplier management as a living program, continually updating risk profiles and ensuring transparency for brands. It is never just a one-and-done checklist that sits in a drawer somewhere."
It is a highly dynamic, ongoing relationship. And what is vital to understand is that this dynamic nature extends all the way out of the factory and into the hands of the end user.
Oh, through a process called post-market surveillance, or PMS.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean in reality when the guide talks about tracking consumer feedback, adverse events, and recalls? Is a post-market surveillance program basically just a manufacturer sitting around a computer reading bad online reviews? Or is there an actual science to it?
Oh, it is a highly rigid, documented science. If we connect this to the bigger picture, a true PMS program is essentially a closed-loop clinical feedback system.
Okay.
It is not just about a customer service rep fielding complaints about a broken pump. It involves a formal protocol with defined roles, timelines, and legal reporting requirements. Dr. Elena Rossi points out that recalls are costly, but preparedness minimizes damage to brand equity.
So how does the loop actually close? Like, practically speaking.
Let's say consumers are consistently reporting a minor adverse skin reaction, or even just that the pump on the bottle gets clogged when the product is half empty.
Okay.
The PMS system officially flags that data. It runs it backward through that HIA immune system we talked about earlier.
I'm late.
The engineering or formulation team investigates, finds the root cause, and physically alters the packaging design or the formula viscosity for the very next production run.
That's incredible.
It systematically threads consumer data directly back into the research and development lab. It uses post-market realities to drive continuous improvement, keeping the product safe and the consumers confident.
It is honestly staggering to pull back and look at the sheer scale of the machinery we just walked through.
It's a lot.
To take a single clean beauty product from an idea in a founder's head to a finished good on a shelf requires stage-gate formulation, green chemistry validation, near-shoring strategies, ISO-certified quality systems, packaging compatibility testing, secure IP data rooms, strict change controls, and closed-loop post-market surveillance.
Yeah.
It is a massive, incredibly complex, data-driven ecosystem.
And its success relies entirely on finding a contract manufacturing partner who doesn't just blindly execute orders, but who actively manages every moving part of that ecosystem with total transparency and scientific precision.
So to you listening, whether you are an entrepreneur sketching out a business plan for a new wellness launch, or you are just a consumer browsing that cosmetics aisle later today, this deep dive fundamentally changes how you should look at the word clean on a label.
Absolutely.
It is not just a gentle, holistic marketing term. Behind that single word is a massive, highly regulated paper trail.
Which leaves us with a fascinating and perhaps slightly unsettling thought to consider.
Oh, what's that?
In a world where scientific understanding constantly evolves, what happens when the definition of clean changes overnight?
Oh, wow.
If a once celebrated near-shored ingredient is suddenly deemed unclean or unstable by a new wave of scientific research tomorrow, how quickly can this massive, rigid machinery of contracts, formulations, and supply chains actually pivot to keep a brand alive?
That is the real stress test. And the next time you pick up one of those elegant frosted glass bottles with the minimalist font, you will know exactly how much hidden engineering it took just to get it into your hands.